questions I see all the time in polymer clay groups and forums is how thin does the cutting edge really need to be? It's a 0.4 cutting edge good enough, or do you need to go all the way down to 0.2? And while we're at it, is it worth learning to design your own cutters? In this video, we're gonna find out. I'm going to download a selection of popular clay cutters from a few different websites, take a close look at how they're designed, measure them, and see what makes them work. Then I'll pick my favorite design and print it with two different nozzles, one at 0.4mm and one at 0.2mm. Once I print these two, I'm gonna redesign the cutter myself in Fusion 360 and print it again at 0.4 and 0.2 and see if there's a difference between the cutter I've designed and the cutter I've downloaded. And hopefully by doing this will give you an idea if you should start learning Fusion 360, if you should start designing your own cutters, and if the cutters that you design and put some effort into would cut better than the cutters that you download. So let's go to the internet and find some cutters. So let's look at makerworld.com first, which is one of my favorite websites for STL files. That's mainly because I have a few bamboo printers and everything here is free. So any type of model you find into makerworld.com, everything is absolutely free. You would probably need to create an account, but also the account is free. So let's have a look at the clay cutters. So I'm simply going to type in clay cutters, and I want to download the ones that have most likes. So I'm going to go to trending. Let's go to likes. So I want to download, let's download this one first, which it has 1,600 downloads and 800 likes. So let's download this one quickly. Now let's go back and find another cutter, and I'm gonna go with this one. This one has 1,000 downloads and 721 likes, which is a really good one. So download the STL. Now let's see another one. Let's download one of these flowers here. So I'm going to download all of them, and I'm just going to look at one of them. So let's go now to another favorite website called Thingiverse. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to download clay cutters. So let's go to the first one, which is 959 likes or downloads, I don't know really. And we're going to download all of this. Again, Thingiverse, it's a free to download website. You have your license here. This is licensed under the Creative Commons blah blah. Anyway, if you want to download for yourself, you just wait and it downloads. And let's download this one as well. And 2 should be enough from Thingiverse. Now let's go to another one. Let's go to Google actually. So if we go to google.com and we just type in clay cutter free STL and go, let's see what we're getting. Printable.com is Prusa's website, also free if you want to download something from there. They've got really cool stuff as well. It just seems a bit slower than other websites. So let's go to clay cutters and let's download one. Let's download this guy, or maybe the best one. Let's find the best match ratings. So this is 5-star, This is a 5-star cutter, 1.2 kilo downloads. This is a 4.8, 12 kilo. Let's see most popular. 2.2K. Let's download this one. 2.2K. I don't think any of the other websites, I don't think any of the other cutters have 2.2K. So none of them, even the one on Maker World, it had 927. So this is apparently one of the best and most downloaded. So let's download this one. And I want to download one of these, and I want to download one of these. So I want to see what makes them better than other stuff. Anyway, I think we have enough. Let's import one by one and see at 0.2 standard how do these clay cutters look like. So I'm going to take the first one from Thingiverse. I think I'm just going to load it, and I want to slice this and see what's going on. So it looks pretty good. It has one layer line all the way through, which should be pretty good. I don't really understand what this is. Why is it doing that? And it's probably because there's something wrong here at the very bottom of the cutter. But I'm gonna change the wall generator from classic to Arachne and see if that does the same thing. And there we go, it's changed. So I think that might be the bottom of this cutter might be slightly smaller than the normal 0.42 layer width, and that's why I didn't do it with the normal wall generator. And this is something maybe that everybody can do really quickly. Okay, let's add another one and compare them side by side. So here's another one, and it seems to be very similar. And let's slice them. And yeah, seems to be a normal cutter as well. Pretty straightforward. Let's try another one. I'm gonna take a random one from this list. Slice this plate. So this third one I think is one of the first ones on Thingiverse. And this one has a bit of a different shape to it. So if you look at the sides of this, it tapers up. And on the very top section, it has one wall, which is 0.4. And then as it goes down, it has two walls. But let's check the distance between these things and the very top. So between the inside pattern thing and the very top of the cutting edge. So to do that, I'm going to go to prepare, and I want to measure. I want to measure from the top of this, from this line to this line, and that is 2 millimeters. Now, when you run your clay through the pasta machine, usually you get somewhere around 2.5 to 2.8 millimeters. So this clay will cut 2 millimeters down, and it will kind of emboss that at 0.508, which is pretty good. The base of this is, let's measure it. Let's measure that. So that is 3 millimeters edge for holding this cutter, which is pretty good. Let's do the other ones. That one is 2.5 millimeters, a bit smaller. And this one is 3 millimeters again. 3 millimeters is kind of what I do as well, so 3 millimeters is pretty good. Obviously this one is visibly smaller than the other one. I do like the taller cutters, so I'm gonna check this. This is 9.5 millimeters, so this one, the whole thing will be 12.5 millimeters height. I usually make them way higher. That's simply because when my wife uses the cutters, or my friends use the cutters, they usually have long nails, and that helps them with holding the cutters without struggling and without damaging the outside of the clay, because sometimes you're using a slab of clay and you don't want your nails to get into the clay. So that's the reason I make them usually taller. So let's take another one. Let's take this one and see how they look like. Now these are obviously 3 of them in one cutter, and they are almost the same size as it, so smaller. The edges are smaller, way smaller. So even if you check the size of this, let's call it a holding rim, and as you can see, this one has a way smaller one. And let's slice this as well and have a look at those. And I just realized this leaf one doesn't have the see-through bottom, which I would never recommend to people to use this, especially on such a small detail cutter. And that's mainly because your clay may get stuck into this, and if you don't have any way to push the clay out, that clay is stuck there until you break it, so you lose that bit of clay. So I would never recommend anybody to design things like this. I always recommend designing your cutter empty, and if you have floating details, just make a bridge. And yeah, they seem pretty good. And let's load up another one. I'm actually gonna delete these 3 because I'm definitely not going to use these ones as an example. So I'm going to go to prepare and delete these guys, and let's look at number 5, and that would be the ghost. Again, there's 2 files into this. They seem to be mirrored, so when you cut your earrings, you can cut both left and right side, but this cutting edge is actually very small. So I'm going to measure it quickly. So we're looking at this, and this is 1 millimeter. If you have more than 1 millimeter cutter, then basically all of this is going to contact your clay, and it kind of makes no difference at the moment. And you either make it bigger and make it longer, or you just don't make it at all, like this, guys. So again, the holding rim is very small, and also somehow this one has a hole in the eyes and this one doesn't, and then all of this could get stuck very easily into your cutter and basically not perform well. So again, I would recommend making a hole here just so you can push your clay out in case it gets stuck to your cutter. But if your cutter is designed right and used properly, that shouldn't happen. Okay, so that's the ghost, and let's get the one that everybody liked. So that's the 2000 something likes, and that seemed to be designed pretty well actually. Again, you can see all the elements which I was talking about, the empty space between these, so in case it gets stuck you can push your clay out. You get your one of the biggest cutting edges, which I really like. So I'm gonna measure this quickly, and let's measure that. So that's 4mm cutting edge, which is really good. And the height of it, that's 4 plus 5, that's 9, plus 2, that's 11. So 11mm high cutter, I think is not big enough. I don't think that would be something I would do, but it looks really good. So let's see which one I should redesign. So I'm actually gonna take this guy and I want to redesign this one. So I'm gonna find this and import it into Fusion 360, and I'll show you exactly how I would design this to make it a bit better, to make it basically in such way that I like it. Now, I know that what I like might not be for everybody, but at the end of the day, that's what I like, and that's what I would actually show people how to design their own cutters. Okay, so let's take this file, bring it to Fusion 360 and redesign it the way I would. Then I'm going to take this file and I'm going to 3D print it with a 0.4. I'm going to 3D print it with a 0.2, and I'm going to do the same thing with my files, 0.4, 0.2, and see the difference between them, and maybe give them to somebody to test them, or maybe I'll test them myself, and let's see the results. Okay, so here we are in Fusion 360, and in order for me to make that cutter, which I've decided I'm gonna copy and maybe improve, hopefully, I want to get my size right first time, because this is another question that a lot of people ask, and the question is it possible to resize cutters? So sometimes you find a cutter that's quite small and you want to resize it, but the problem which you'll find is that when you resize your cutter, and I'm going to show you, if let's say we decide we keep this cutter, but this cutter is actually quite small, so the actual earring that you're going to end up with will be 23mm, so 2.3 centimeters, which is quite small. Now if you would go to take this cutter and scale it up, you can definitely make it bigger, and you can get it to pretty much whatever size you want. And this is going to be, let's say, 49mm now, so it's almost 5 centimeters long. But the problem which you're having now is that when you increase this cutter, the cutting edge also scales up. So if you click this cutter and check between two of these points, you'll see that you have 1.027mm, so your 0.4mm cutting edge is gone. So in order for you to make your own cutters a bit bigger, you basically have only one option, which is redesigning, and I'm going to show you how you redesign right now. So if you go to Fusion 360, and you can insert a mesh, and straight away, if you leave it there, I'm going to say okay to that, and I want to create a sketch onto the back of this, and I want to make the sketch as big as the size of the cutter that I want to make. So let's say I want to make my cutter 50 millimeters. So I'm gonna take a rectangle of 50 millimeters. So the width doesn't really matter. I just want the height. So I'm gonna say okay to that and finish this sketch. Then I'm gonna go to my mesh insert. I'm gonna go to modify and scale. And I'm gonna scale it up until the point that I feel like that's pretty much what size I want it to. So I'm gonna make it just slightly bigger, say okay to that. And just to confirm, I'm gonna move it down a bit. And okay, this is too small because I want my 50 to be the piece that I'm cutting. So I'm gonna go back to scale. So I'm gonna go to modify, scale, and I want to make it even bigger than that. Maybe somewhere there. Say okay. And I'm gonna keep moving and keep scaling it till it gets to kind of where I want it. So at the moment, if you look at where the cutting edge of this cutter is, that's gonna be the top and that's gonna be the bottom. So now if I hide this sketch and measure everything, if I measure from this point to this point, that's gonna be 54 millimeters. So that's pretty good for me. That's kind of the size of cutters I want to make. And I want to do one more thing with my imported cutter, and I want to select it, go to mesh, go to modify and convert mesh, and that will basically convert the mesh I have into an object. Okay, now let's make the origin visible, and the reason is because I want to move this cutter closer to the origin. So I want to take this and move it right in the middle of this. So as much as possible, I want to center it to the origin of this. So let's say okay to that. And now let's create a sketch. And I want to create a sketch on top of this. And because I have everything pretty much centralized, I have a clean slate to work with. And I'm simply gonna start tracing with a fit point spline from the top of this. And I'm just gonna follow all the outside contours of these cutters. So let's start with the top point, which is gonna be somewhere there. And I'm gonna go onto this line, point by point. And I want to finish just there. Okay. And I'm gonna say okay to that. And now I have my first line. There we go. And I'm gonna keep doing that, and I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so now I've got all the outside lines of this, and I can just make this body invisible. And I want to take another line from the top of this to the bottom of this. So there we go. Okay, so now that we have all of that, let's select everything onto this side and let's create cutting edge. So I want to go with 0.4 millimeters cutting edge. Okay, so let's get this body visible again, because I want to create these embossing lines as well. So let's take these lines that we've done before, and I want to take a feed point spline, and I'm gonna start from somewhere here, and I'm gonna go to this point, and I'm just gonna follow pretty much the same length of that. And now I want to take this line and I want to offset it by 0.4 millimeters, and that should overlap with this pretty well, and I think that should be fine. Let's hide the body and see what we have here, and yeah, that should be pretty good. We can just take all of these when we extrude. It's not going to make much of a difference, so that should be okay. Let's do the same thing here. So I'm gonna get my body visible, and I want to take this point. Well, actually I'm gonna go from somewhere here, and I'm gonna take a feed point spline. I'm gonna go from this line, I'm gonna go to that point, and I want to follow the same distance, kind of like 0.4 in between them. Okay, and I'm gonna go somewhere there. Okay, so now that I have that line, I can take that line and I want to modify it a bit, trying to get it as close as possible to the other one. So there is something like that. I think that should be fine. And let's hide the body again. And I'm going to take this line and offset this by 0.4 millimeters. Okay. And yeah, I think that would be good. Okay. Okay, let's extrude our first profiles. So we're gonna extrude all of this as a cutting edge. So let's finish this sketch and extrude this at 19 millimeters. Okay, so that's pretty decent, and I want to start modifying it straight away, and I want to give it a bit of a fillet. Okay, and I want the fillet to be actually not constant. I want it to be asymmetrical, and then I want to go with this all the way to the edge, and I want to take this about 3 millimeters down. Okay, so I'm just going to go up to 3 millimeters. There we go, and that should give me pretty good cutting edge. Okay, so that's a very thin cutting edge. I can actually check how thin that is, and that will be a 0.075 millimeters, which I think it's a pretty good cutting edge. Okay, so let's close this. Let's get the sketch visible again, and I want to take these two and I want to extrude this at 16 millimeters. So E for extrude and 16 millimeters. Now I'm left with these guys, and there's one thing I really want to do here is take this and I want to give it a little fillet, and the radius type is going to be asymmetrical. So I can actually just go all the way up to that, and that should give me a really nice transition into that edge. So I'm probably gonna drop it down a bit more, just somewhere there, and okay, I'm gonna be using 2mm, so I'm gonna use the same 2mm for the other one. Say okay to that. Let's do the same thing, fillet and asymmetrical, and I'm gonna go 2mm. Okay, so that will give me a really nice transition when it comes to the edges of that cutter. You'll see when we cut everything, you'll see what and how it looks like. So let's take this body and let's mirror it. So I'm going to create a mirror, and I'm going to use mirror plane, this plane, and that will give me a really nice cutter all the way through. Now I want to go back to my sketch, and I want to take this line and I want to offset this by 0.2mm, and I want to do the same thing, offset this by -0.2, so I can get that really nice line in the middle. And let's finish this sketch. And let's hide that one, and I can take this too, this little one, and all of these. Okay, so that's not connected, so let's go connect it. I'm gonna go back to my sketch, and I'm just gonna connect these to that. Makes no difference now. So let's finish the sketch, and I can take these two, these, and these two, and this little one, and I can just extrude all of this up to this point, which is 60mm, and instead of operation cut I can use join. Okay, so now we have a really nice transition in between these, all of these edges on both sides. So one more thing we need to do is to create that handle rim, and I'm gonna hide this body and select all of the outside lines. So I'm gonna select all of these while holding Control, and I'm gonna offset this by -3mm. Okay, and now it's not connected to anything, so we're gonna do that. We're just gonna extend this line that way, and we're gonna extend this line same like we did before. We're gonna start from somewhere to follow the same path, and we're gonna do that, and maybe that. Okay, so now we've extended that, we can do the middle lines like that, and we can do one more line on the very top of this all the way up. Okay, now we have this profile that we can say finish sketch, and we can extrude this by 3mm, and we're gonna have a new body. Okay, so let's select this body and mirror it according to the origin. So we're gonna go create a mirror. Let's hide this, and we use this plane as a mirror plane. Okay, that should be all connected there, and it should be all connected to this body. Okay, so let's combine these ones, and okay, and let's hide the sketch and see what we have. So now we have pretty much the same cutter we had before, and I'm gonna move it to one side just so you guys can see better. It's the same cutter, it's just way bigger, the edges are sharper. So when we 3D print this, it'll have a very sharp edge. And we're gonna have these transitions, and I think they're gonna make a difference in how the whole clay is gonna look like at the end. The whole transition on the edge. And yeah, let's send this to print, and we're gonna send the other ones to print and see if it makes a difference if you redesign everything from scratch. See if it's worth redesigning, if it works better, and I think it will. I think it will look much better. I think the final product after redesigning this will look much better, especially because at this size you can have the clean edges onto this cutter. So let's send this to 3D print as it is, and I'm gonna print the first one in 0.4 millimeters. So I'm going to be using a 0.2 standard setting on my Bamboo Lab A1, and I'm going to be using a gray PLA basics. Now let's drag this file in, and I have a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and the only thing I'm going to change on my setting is going to be at quality. I'm going to go for seam position. I'm going to go to the back, so my seam position will be here, and I also want to change the wall generator from classic to arachne. And that's all the settings I'm going to use. So seam position in back and wall generator arachne. Okay, now let's change the nozzle size to 0.2 millimeters, and we're going to use the exact same settings as we did before. The only difference is that I'm probably going to have to go to 0.14 millimeter layer height, and everything else is going to stay the same. So let's slice this plate at 0.2. That's going to take obviously double the time, so it's 43 minutes 50. But for this experiment, I'm happy to print this at 0.2 millimeters. I'm very curious to see how it looks like and if it's going to cut better than the 0.4 one. Okay, so let's check the prints. So this is the original cutter, which I've just downloaded, and I've just put it on to the 3D print with a normal standard 0.4 millimeters. And let's check the thickness of this material. So as you can see, this is at 0.68, which is quite a thick cutter to use. And we're gonna check the cut in a minute, but I want to measure the other three. So let's check the one I've printed with 0.2 millimeters nozzle, and the thickness at the very top of this, it's 0.39. So this is way closer
to 0.4 millimeters. Okay, so let's check the one I've redesigned, and this is the one I've redesigned and 3D printed on 0.4. And as you can see, there's a few problems with the print just there. Now there's not much to do with the file itself. It's more to do with the settings of my 3D printer. And because I don't use this filament for printing very fine things, I'm probably not gonna tune it too much to get rid of those gaps, but I think that's most likely because of an under extrusion. But let's check the thickness at the very tip of this cutter, so the very tip of the cutting edge. So we're gonna go right at the end, and even though I 3D printed this in a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, I got a 0.29 mil cutting edge. So this one at 0.4 millimeters printed should cut pretty well. Now let's have a look at the 0.2 millimeters and let's see if this one has any difference. So we're gonna go back to 0 and we're just gonna put it on top of this. So this one at 0.2 is at 0.25. So I'm going to check a few more places. 0.20. 0.20. So printing my own cutter, designed with a taper at the very top, has a 0.2 millimeters layer width, which should in theory make it cut really well. So let's get some clay onto this piece of glass and let's see how every single one of these cuts. So I'm going to start with the little ones, which is 0.4 mil print with nothing changed on it. And I'm going to try to cut with the one that was printed on 0.2 first. So I'm going to use these two and I'm going to keep these ones over here and let's get some clay. And this is the 0.2. So I don't see much of a difference in how they cut. The 0.21 seems to be a bit smoother when you press it in, and the 0.4 it just pretty much does the same thing as the other one. Now I think on the 0.2 you have a bit less of a burr edge than on the 0.4, but the distance is not too big. So let's try to cut the big ones and see what they do. Now for these big ones, because they are meant to go onto a thicker material, but that's just from designing, I'm just gonna fold this one in half, and then I will keep this edging to give me exact 3mm distance, and that will give me a perfect height of 3mm. So let's roll this one at 3mm. And let's start with the 0.4 and see how that cuts. And let's cut the one made at 0.2. So again, the 0.2 seems to be cutting at less resistance, but the difference in burr all the way around it is not much. And if you look at the back, again, it's not much difference in how much we need to process this after we finish with the pieces. So does it make sense to 3D print your cutters straight from the internet, or actually learn how to design them? Yes, if you want to scale this cutter up to this size, you don't really have a choice, because when you expand this, the cutting edge will become very, very thick. So you will have to redesign anyway. If you have a 0.2 nozzle, then by all means print on 0.2 nozzle. If you only have the 0.4, then print on 0.4 as it is and try to redesign. Now, the fact that I've redesigned this and I gave it a bit of a cutting edge up here, it did help, I think, with the cutting. At least when I pressed them down, the 0.2 felt a bit easier to cut than the 0.4. And yes, if you have a 0.2, printing 0.2, it will make a much better cutter. If you only have 0.4, printing 0.4, try to give yourself a bit of a cutting edge and you should be fine. So I'm gonna leave you guys with this. I hope everything makes sense what I did and why I compare all of these. If you want to make your own cutters, then I have some more tutorials on my page that you can watch, and I'm probably gonna make a whole bunch more because people seem to like cutters a lot. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.